pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and, of course, sloth, the 7 deadly sins. This case has them all and more, starting with the original sin, the corrupt nature of mankind. And they all come together in the city of sin, or the city of saints, depending upon one's perspective, Montreal.
Montreal, yes! I confess I do know a little about sin and Montreal, but I'm not saying anything further about that until I talk to my lawyer. But seriously, Lalonde, shouldn't we be leaving this sin stuff up to a priest or somebody more qualified than us in the area of theology? I mean, we're not experts on sin. What we know is murder.
True. It's just that I've been reading this marvelous book by a Canadian detective named George Farah Lajoie. What a fascinating treatise on how a brilliant and professional detective works. We're going to meet him this episode. As to your question on theology and our particular qualifications, murder is a mortal sin, Inspector Murray, particularly egregious when committed by a Roman Catholic priest.
A protector of souls, losing his own? Quis custodiet ipsos custodes. Who watches the watchers?
And that's where we come in.
Ho-ho! Now I am intrigued. This sounds like a job for...
Two old dicks.
We are 2 old dicks here to share histories, mysteries. We hope you care. We are 2 old dicks and ink and half.
Welcome to our channel, folks. We are 2 old dicks, and we explore historic crimes from the perspective of retired Canadian detectives. I'm Dave Lalonde, and my partner is Detective Chief Inspector John Wilson Murray.
Wonderful to see everyone back. I see Jimmy and Susie and Betty and... Oh, I'm such a kidder. It's all I can do not to romp around this room. Tell the folks more about me, would you, Lalonde? That is kind of what they're here for, after all.
Okay, well, in part anyway. My esteemed colleague is the great detective himself, Chief Inspector John Wilson Murray, who was the head of the province of Ontario's small detective branch during the late 19th century. He traveled throughout the province investigating murders and other major cases and wrote his famous memoirs in 1904. They've served as an inspiration for detectives and true crime enthusiasts since. He's also a personal hero of mine.
I know. Nothing to be ashamed of there, kid. My goodness, it looks like that copy of my memoirs is in some lovely young lady's boudoir. Well, I did have a certain appeal, I suppose. Keep striving for my greatness, kid. A man's reach should exceed his grasp. Else, what's a harem for? I believe it was Browning who said that. Anyway, tell them about yourself and your books, Lalonde.
Thanks. And with respect to Browning, your memory for famous quotes is unique. Anyway, I'm the author of a series of books called The Inspector Jack Butler Mysteries. They're historic police procedural novels set in the mid-1980s in Ontario, Canada. They offer the readers a backstage pass into how murder investigations unfold from a detective's perspective and are based somewhat on my own experiences. I spent 30 years as a detective with the Ontario Provincial Police, investigating crimes throughout the province. From there, I went on to become a college professor for 15 years, teaching criminal investigations techniques. I'm fascinated by the lives and work of the detectives of the past, and did my master's degree in history focusing upon them and what they can teach us about their era.
I feel like I'm at the optometrist's, hearing the word "I" so much. Or maybe the Navy again. Aye, aye. As for seeing behind the veil of our era, You're not kidding. Oh, the stories I could tell. Wait a minute, I did tell them. And on that note, your stories are pretty darn good too, kid. Explain to the people that they don't actually have to go down to South America to get them. This Amazon place will actually send the books to them. Incredible.
Exactly. Though if people do actually travel to the Amazon, they can probably order them from there too. I've added a link below for those who would prefer to stay home. Are you ready to dive into today's case now?
Lead on, Macbeth.
Our case takes place in 1922 in one of the world's premier cities, Montreal, which is in the Canadian province of Quebec. It involves a murder of literally biblical proportions, a sibling rivalry echoing that of Abel and Cain, and a Roman Catholic priest.
Egads! That sounds like a very complex and delicate matter.
You better believe it. At that time in history, the church had long held a powerful hold on the faithful. In concert with the provincial government, they were the vanguard for the souls and language of French Canadians in Quebec, Canada's largest francophone province. The church held a dominant, institution-shaping authority over the social life, morality, education, and political culture of Quebecers. And that power wasn't just symbolic, it was structural, daily, and deeply embedded in their lives.
So, you're suggesting that this case required someone of particular tact and ability?
It certainly did, and on that note, I would like to introduce our guest detective and the man who investigated the mystery of the Felonious Father.
Ouch! Burn!
Detective Georges Faralajoie of the Montreal Police, at your service.
It is an honor to meet you and have you as our guest, sir. I am a great admirer of yours and must tell you I consider you to be one of the finest detectives in Canadian history.
You are too kind, Monsieur Lalonde, and thank you for the most charming introduction. Please, just call me Lajoie. Everyone else did. Chief Inspector Murray, I cannot tell you what an honor it is to meet you, sir. You were an idol to many Canadian detectives that followed you, including myself.
Really? Moi? Lalonde, why have we waited so long to talk about Detective Lajoie and his cases? Must this program always be about you, and maybe a little about me on occasion, and maybe a little more often, Tell us a bit about yourself, would you, Lajoie? You have the floor, sir.
Of course, and thank you. I am originally from the Vilayet of Syria, Bilad el-Sham, a place you may know as the Levant. I was born in Damascus and came to Canada as a young man. Though Arabic is the language of my birth, my family was part of a small French-speaking Catholic community, and the province of Quebec was a natural and comfortable fit for me. I adopted the name Farah, which is Arabic for joy, like the other portion of my last name, Lajoie, to honor my dual heritage. I am now very much a Montréalais. Je suis Montréalais. Do you know Montreal, Inspector Murray?
Well, yes, you could say that. I have visited your city on occasion. I was great friends with the famous Montreal police detective, Silas Carpenter. Quite the fellow, I can assure you. We should talk about him and his work sometime. Lalonde, get on that, will you?
Oh, we will. I assure you, he's definitely on our list.
A great detective. Not as great as me, perhaps. Well, I suppose that doesn't really matter. Through Carpenter, I made the acquaintance of a charming rascal named Charles McKiernan, but we all called him Joe Beef. He had a cozy little establishment on Common Street. I got to know some young ladies. I believe they may have been his, sisters. Or perhaps not. They graciously showed me the wonders of your fair city. But enough of that, though it does remind me that it's been a while since I've been to confession. À tout à l'heure, ladies. Now, on that note, what's all this business about a priest and Abel and Cain as such?
On Saturday, January the 7th, at 7 a.m., the body of a young man was found outside a Montreal city maintenance shed on the Queen Mary Road, near the junction of Snowden Avenue. This part of the city of Montreal is, in fact, known as Snowden. This was a quiet, respectable neighborhood that was growing rapidly, with new houses being constructed regularly. Most of the residents were members of Montreal's large Anglophone community. Many of them were Jewish or Protestant. At that time, Montreal, including our own police department, was approximately 35% Anglophone, though most of our officers were bilingual to some extent. The body was discovered by two city employees, Messieurs Higginbotham and Laurent, who were reporting in for work. They had left the shed the evening before, at the end of the day, and the body, of course, was not there at that time. The hands of the body were tied to his sides with rope, and a cloth was twisted tightly around his neck. This photograph is a recreation, I must point out, done a short time later by an enterprising photographer and his assistant. Higginbotham went quickly to Station 28 to report the crime. It was quite close by, and he was able to proceed there on foot, while Laurent remained at the scene with the body. Lieutenant Renaud, Sergeant Pouzor, and Constable Legault and Dansereau were dispatched to the scene, and they quickly assessed the situation. A call was made to the Detective Division, and Detective Sergeant Mercier detailed his men to investigate. Detectives Monarch and Dunphy attended the scene immediately and began to make their assessment. There were no marks visible on the body, and no identification was found during their initial search. The body was taken to the morgue on Craig Street by wagon, and a more detailed examination of the body was begun. It was frozen stiff, and their first thought was that the cause of death was strangulation, with robbery being the suspected motive.
I can tell you from personal experience that it would not be possible, or at the very least neither practicable nor professional, to conduct an autopsy on a body that is frozen stiff. It would likely not have been until Sunday, the next day, when the pathologist could begin that.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. External observations were made in great detail immediately, however. Detectives Monarch and Dunphy took greater care in examining the victim's clothing, and a letter was discovered.
I must say, your police service is operating like a very disciplined, well-organized machine at this point. It speaks to your officers' experience and professionalism. My own experience with Montreal police detectives many years later was the same. I was extremely impressed by their hospitality in addition to their professional competence. Great cops.
Thank you, Monsieur Lalonde. I am happy to know that the customs and traditions of our department have lived on.
Yes, I suppose I should add that my experience was the same. That Silas Carpenter was a cracking good detective. He was also one heck of a lot of fun, after working hours, of course. We worked together back in 1898. A great chief of detectives.
I see the name Raoul Delorme on the outside of the envelope, along with an address. It appears that that may have been the first clue detectives had with respect to the identity of the deceased.
You are correct. It was decided that members from police headquarters would be sent to the address on the envelope, 190 Saint-Hubert Street, to speak to the occupant. Detective Captain Desgrosseilliers and Detective Sergeant Pigeon were the ones selected. It was hoped that they could obtain information which might help us in identifying the victim. But what they got was so much more. It was now 11 o'clock on a bitterly cold morning in Montreal. The house before them was a 3-story structure of yellow brick standing on Rue Saint-Hubert, near the corner of Dorchester. It was by all appearances a single-family home, as there was only one entrance door. To their great surprise, a priest opened the door.
We are police officers. Does Raoul Delorme live here?
He does. Raoul is my brother. Has anything happened to him? He did not sleep at home last night. Could he be in a tight fix?
We have come to tell you that a young man has been seriously wounded and that we have found some papers on his person which would indicate that he is Raoul Delorme.
But where is he?
At the morgue.
So he must be dead?
Yes, and we have come to ask you to accompany us to the morgue for the purpose of identification.
I will be with you in a few seconds. Give me a minute to dress. And for the present, do not mention anything to my sisters.
A few minutes later, Father Delorme returned, and they proceeded to the morgue. The body of Raoul Delorme was laid out, and it was apparent that Father Delorme recognized him as his brother immediately. It was when he saw Raoul's clothes that he made his first remark.
These are his.
With that said, he blessed the body without showing the least bit of emotion. Detective Desgrosseillet and Pigeon were struck by the indifference he showed, and I am left to speculate now what might have been going through his mind. A comprehensive understanding of what Father Delorme knew about his brother and his death was required. It was decided to enlist the aid of our leader, Chief Lepage. He was a man of sharp instincts and an expert in probing the depths of the most reticent man for his secrets. Moreover, he understood that interrogation is a game of patience and skill. Time is with the hunter. The priest explained that last time he had seen his brother was at 3 p.m. on Friday, the feast of the Epiphany, the day before he was found murdered. It was his understanding that he was going to the Princess Theatre.
Theatre, eh? So, he liked Shakespeare. That's a good sign. I wonder if he went to see Hamlet and Juliet.
That is a variation of the play I do not know. The Princess Theatre was an establishment which showed moving pictures as well as vaudeville performances.
Moving pictures? That doesn't make any sense. How can you look at them if someone is moving them? And as for this vaudeville fellow, well, I've never even heard of him.
I'll explain this all to you later, Inspector Murray. Sorry to interrupt, Detective Lajoie. Please continue.
Of course. Father Delorme told my colleagues that his brother Raoul had called him on the telephone later that Friday night at 7 p.m. He said that he had met 2 friends and would be spending the evening with them.
This was very unusual for Raoul, as he had very few friends and no enemies. The only other time he had slept out was on Christmas Eve, when he stayed with a friend, Patry.
My colleagues were troubled by a sense that there was more to this story than was being told. But they were professionals. Patient professionals. And in our line of work, gentlemen, that means tracking down all possible information, to either verify it or to eliminate it.
Occam's razor, one of the fundamental perspectives of criminal investigations.
Precisely, mon ami, precisely. It gives me great pleasure to know his principles are still known and being applied in your time.
They still call it that, eh? I was hoping that by this time they had renamed it. Maybe something like Murray's Mantra. How does that sound? Look into that for me, will you, kid?
Right. Will do. So, what did your colleagues do next?
They immediately brought the resources of our detective division to bear and made a painstaking study in the neighborhood around the Princess Theatre. This was begun on Saturday and went all the way through to the time of the inquest on Monday morning. Detectives obtained a photograph of Raoul Delorme from his brother and made several copies. Our detectives questioned the owners of restaurants as well as taxi chauffeurs, but it was all in vain. They could find no clue. Keep in mind that I personally was totally involved in the investigation of another murder, while my confrères were busy with this new case, and only learned about their efforts on Monday after the inquest. I also learned that an autopsy had been performed on the body of Raoul Delorme on Sunday, the day following its discovery. This detailed examination of the body was done by Doctors MacTaggart and Derome. Are you familiar with their excellent reputations?
Not Dr. McTaggart until this case, though after having studied it, I agree that he seems to be an outstanding pathologist. As for Dr. Derome, he remains one of the most famous forensic scientists in Canadian history. He literally wrote the book on forensic pathology, which I am proud to say I own. I know that Dr. Derome studied under the great forensic scientist Locard in France, and that the laboratory he created in Montreal was used as a model for the FBI lab in Washington. We'll be profiling him in another episode. You had some very big names on this case.
Let's not forget the work of Professor Ellis at the University of Toronto in my time. I have no doubt it was part of Derome's education and knowledge.
No doubt, Inspector Murray, and I'm sure you're right. Again, we'll be profiling him in another episode, but I have the notes he made during the post-mortem on one of your cases, the Frederick Benwell murder, and they are fabulous. In fact, I showed them to a very esteemed forensic pathologist I worked with in my time, and he agreed. Let's save that for now, though, and get back to the post-mortem, or autopsy as many people know it, of Raoul Delorme.
Bien sûr. Raoul Delorme had been a physically robust young man, of 23 at the time of his death. He was rather short in stature, at 5 feet 4 inches, but was a muscular 150 pounds. A rather handsome young man. I leave the rest to Dr. MacTaggart himself to tell you.
There were 8 bullet holes in the head and neck. The holes are all small and closed, with no indications of exit wounds. The death was caused by a hemorrhage resulting from gunshot wounds. There was considerable blood on the clothing, which all seems to have been caused by blood which came from the nose and mouth. The victim must have swallowed an appreciable quantity of the blood, due to the amount in his stomach. There was only a small quantity of food in the stomach, and this was colored with blood. We discovered no trace of drugs, alcohol, or poisons. I also observed light scratches on the back of the right hand, and visible marks of the string that bound the hands together. I was able to extract 2 of the bullets, which were in the chin and jawbone. One was fired point blank, a little below the right temple, where traces of gunpowder can still be perceived. 4 others were shot into the chin, on the right side, and the 6th, as shown by the hole in the collar, would have been shot point blank into the neck, where it has severed one of the veins, near the larynx. The 2 bullets I was able to extract were made of steel and come from a small caliber automatic pistol. They show 6 identical vertical grooves, and Dr. Derome is confident they can be matched to the weapon which fired them, if it is found. It is my opinion that the killer fired using his right hand, has fired from right to left and downwards. That is to say, he was standing, and his victim was either sitting or kneeling.
As if he was on his knees praying for forgiveness under the watchful eyes of his spiritual mentor. Whoops, got ahead of myself a little there. Sorry about that, Dr. McTaggart.
Yes, well, you weren't the only one to consider that possibility, Inspector Murray, I assure you.
The inquest inquest began on Monday morning, January 9th, 1922, located at 443 Rue Saint-Vincent. The offices of the Quebec Provincial Police took up the first floor of the building, and the small inquest courtroom was on the second. Dr. McMahon presided. Father Delorme was called as a witness. He spoke of his half-brother, who was 24 years old and had been a student at the University of Ottawa. When not at school, he resided in the family home at 190 Saint-Hubert, along with Father Delorme and 3 of their sisters. They were a rather wealthy family, each owning several houses in Montreal, but the bulk of the estate was Raoul's. Father Delorme was his guardian and managed all of his affairs. Raoul had an income of a little over $10,000 a year.
Wow, that's equivalent to almost $200,000 today. Not bad for a university student.
Yes, though Raoul received only a meagre portion of that. The priest handled his finances completely, and he assured the court that his brother had never complained about that. The coroner expressed surprise that he was still in school at the age of 24. But Father Delorme explained that his education had been retarded by poor eyesight. He was a peaceable boy, of very even disposition, without many friends.
Anything to indicate whether he used drugs or alcohol?
He did not. He was a creature of habit who would rise late each morning, at around 11 a.m., and play the piano or listen to his gramophone. After lunch, he would go to the theatre, often the Princess, on Sainte Catherine, nearby. Trams ran regularly past, or he could easily walk. He would return at supper time, and then go back to the theatre after, returning home by around 11 in the evening.
Sounds like a very solitary figure. Was he known to carry valuables on him?
He was not. In fact, Father Delorme said that he had given Raoul $20 that night to supplement the $5 of his own that he had already. He said that Raoul was also carrying a roll of stage money from his college in various denominations. Aside from that, he had loaned Raoul his own Burke's pocket watch, one he had received from his father.
Burke's is a very well-known, rather prestigious jewelry store chain in Canada, with their flagship store in Montreal. Presumably a nice watch.
Exactly. Dr. McTaggart, the pathologist, testified next regarding his examination of Raoul's body. He described the nature of the wounds received and offered his opinion that the clothes found wrapped around Raoul's head had been secured there after his death, as there were no holes in them. The inquest was adjourned until Tuesday, January 17th, in order to allow the police to continue our investigation.
I've been reading the Montreal newspapers of that time, and it's a wonder that Dr. McMahon ever slept. He had spent the better part of Saturday, 2 days earlier, in court for other inquests.
Yes, Montreal is a large city, and many deaths occurred, including several other murders.
And we'd love to tell you more, but that's all you get until you hit like and subscribe. Not one more word. Suffer, baby.
We're not doing that. And they don't have to like and subscribe unless they want to.
Really? Okay, fine. But I know they want to. All right. Go ahead, La Joie. The man has spoken. Where have you been up to this point anyway? We should start complaining that we aren't getting enough time allotted.
Here is where I enter the picture, gentlemen. I was a member of the murder squad of the Montreal police. We were a team of 4 detectives, tasked with undertaking only the most delicate and challenging murders, in a city which was no stranger to that horrible crime. I had been working relentlessly in the days leading up to this, and had worked until 5 a.m. that morning. I slipped home to grab a couple of hours of sleep and a change of clothes, and then returned to my desk at 11 a.m. I had just seated myself when my boss, Chief of Detectives Adrien Lepage, sent for me. I went immediately downstairs to his office. I was surprised to see two of my colleagues from the Detective Bureau seated in the office as well. Detective Captain Joseph Desgrosseillet and Detective Sergeant Théodule Tom Pigeon. I realized immediately there must be something very serious going on. Chief Lepage was soon to enlighten me on that.
La Joie. A most atrocious and mysterious murder has just been committed in this city. Leave all other work and give all your time and energy to this matter. I have in you, now as in the past, entire confidence. The honor of our city and particularly of our department rests on the discovery of the murderer. I give you carte blanche in every way. Your colleagues will assist you, as will I, but you are our expert in these matters and we have faith in your judgment and experience.
Phew! No pressure.
No kidding. A brief point of clarification here regarding the role of the investigators in this case. In a city the size of Montreal, which had a very large detective bureau, most murders would have been handled by the divisional detectives, as I believe this one was originally, until the unusual nature of this case was revealed.
That is true. Montreal is a city that has many difficult and complex crimes. Our detectives were kept very busy, and murder investigations were only part of that. Detectives Pigeon and Desgrosseillet were senior members of the headquarters detective division, but not members of the murder squad itself. They had become involved as the case became progressively more delicate, culminating in my being assigned. We were very much a team of equal brothers, though, under the leadership of our great chief of detectives, Lepage.
I think people might be surprised to learn that, at that time, Montreal police officers were not allowed any days off, aside from 15 days of annual vacation. That is quite a work schedule.
Yes, there was some growing concerns raised that we should be allowed at least one day off every fortnight. For myself, I cannot see how my cases could be pursued properly if I was not there every day to do just that.
Ha ha ha! Hear, hear! Why would anyone want a day off from the best job in the world? Beats me.
Incredible compared to the way things are today, and I do not say that with any disrespect to the hard-working officers now. Oh well, times change and we change with them. So now you were involved. It must have been daunting. What were your first steps?
Gentlemen, Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, presented us with these eternal words of wisdom. When a man does not know what harbor he is making for, no wind is the right wind.
Ah, yes. In our time, it's expressed as, you can't know where you're going until you know where you have been.
Precisely. And that is what I did first. I sat down with my respected colleagues and listened to what they knew and considered their assessment of the facts to that point. I needed to see things for myself, though. To that end, it was important for me to retrace the investigation, which I had joined 2 days late. My colleagues Desgrosseillet and Pigeon and I moved forward toward the beginning, you might say. We drove quickly out to the location the body was found. That gruesome spot. I deplore the fact that the body had been brought to the morgue before we arrived. For a personal study is always more precise and more useful than any information given by a third party.
That is a common disadvantage detectives face, since we are often called in after the fact, for various reasons.
Very true, mon cher Inspecteur Murray. I began by speaking with the two men who had found the body of Raoul Delorme at the maintenance shed again, Messieurs Henri Higginbotham and Eusèbe Laurin, and I took my time with them. The importance of earning their trust was paramount. After all, were they not faithful servants of our city, like myself? Mi passion sans failles in them was rewarded. Their observations allowed me to begin to see the crime for what it was. You have heard the expression, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," I'm sure. But that is not always the case. Higginbotham and Laurin confirmed that they had provided direction to the photographer for this recreation, and that it was accurate. But their detailed descriptions brought it further into focus for me.
Photographs are helpful, but they're two-dimensional. They lack the benefit of the human senses beyond that of sight. Moreover, they deny the importance of abstract human observation. For example, this wonderful painting, The Treachery of Images, by Magritte.
Ah oui. La trahison des images. I see your point completely, Monsieur Lalonde. This is not a pipe. Of course not.
Looks like a pipe to me.
One of the things I suggested my detectives and later my students do is consider studying the work of surrealists, like this image, The Persistence of Memory by Dali as well. There is nothing more surreal than a crime scene after all, and I believe it's important that we challenge our immediate perceptions to avoid tunnel vision, as well as being duped by staged scenes.
Wow! Very deep. I just love participating in erudite art discussions. How about this one by Coolidge? Particularly poignant, no?
Yeah, point well taken. One of a series of cigar ads originally, I believe. Hey, even Freud admitted that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Anyhow, I yield the floor to our esteemed guest to continue.
Thank you, but I place great stock in what you have said, Monsieur Lalonde. From their answers, I learned that the body was lying on its back, with the feet pointing towards the shed. The two skirts of the victim's overcoat had been pulled up so that they swathed his head and were fastened by means of a dozen pins or so.
Highly unusual. If robbery was the motive, I would be asking myself what the purpose of all the material being brought to the head was, and not only why, but how the offender was able to accomplish the fine motor skill task of using pins on a bitterly cold night.
Quite right, Inspector Murray. They also told me that the knees of the victim were crossed, and the right knee was over the left and slightly bent. The hands were tied together with a little string, wrapped around each wrist, attached at a distance of 12 inches from one another.
One must consider that in a crime of such intention, that the manner the hands were bound may also be a singular clue. A restraint, possibly, but perhaps also a means to facilitate a carry or drag, like the handle on a piece of luggage.
Inspector Murray, I see why you were so successful. I would like to further tantalize you by advising that there were no rubbers covering the pristinely kept shoes, nor were there any signs of struggle or blood anywhere near where the body had been found. Also, on this bitterly cold day, there were no signs of melting that a warm human body should have caused.
Sounds like the body was dumped there.
Correct, Monsieur Lalonde. I am struck by the absurdity of it all. After completing my interviews of the body finders and examination of the scene, I had detectives interview all of the residents of the immediate area, and they had no knowledge of strange or unusual happenings.
That would be too easy.
As eager as I was to speak to Father Delorme, I remained patient and methodical in my approach. I had to see the body. We went next to the morgue at 179 Craig Street. Doctors Derham and McTaggart met with us to confer on what they had learned from the body. They reaffirmed all of the information regarding the wounds and the bullets I had previously learned. I began my examination of the clothing and personal effects of Raoul Delorme. The shoes, I noted, had never worn rubbers. They were made of tan leather and showed no bloodstains. They were clean and pliable, and the nails thereon were rusted. This proved to me that the boy had not been murdered in the open.
Right. Because if they had been worn outside, the metal would have been worn or abraded. Also, rust requires stillness, suggesting that the shoes had been stored prior to their being put on the body.
Exactly. The trousers were of the same maroon color as the coat and showed no special signs. The coat, however, was stained with blood on the right side, near the shoulder, and also showed a large stain on the bottom near the right hip. On the left lapel there was a bullet hole. The vest is also blood-stained on the upper right side, and some blood-stained links of a gold watch chain hung from a buttonhole. No watch was located.
That suggests some forceful removal to me, which, in fairness, may indicate the watch was stolen.
Possibly, yes, but it certainly makes the location of the presumed watch a live issue. I move on now to the shirt and the underwear. They were completely soaked with blood, on the right side. The necktie, which was blue, was stiff with dried blood. The celluloid collar was also blood-stained and had been pierced by a bullet. There were blackened powder marks around the bullet hole, indicating that it had been fired point-blank. The overcoat showed bloodstains everywhere, even on the shoulder blades. But those stains were parallel and noticeably symmetrical. I may note that the bullet which pierced the suit jacket left no corresponding hole in the overcoat. I believed that the crime was not committed in the open and that the victim, at the time, wore neither rubbers, nor overcoat, nor headgear, as none of these articles were found with the body.
Were there any signs of damage or disarray to the clothing other than those you mentioned?
All the pockets had been turned inside out, and in the overcoat pocket, I located a pair of fur gloves, quite clean and intact. The night of the murder was particularly cold, and this strengthened my belief that the crime was not perpetrated in the open. There were items found in the pockets as well. A pair of eyeglasses in a case, some personal papers with the name of the victim on them, a clean handkerchief, and a ticket for the Princess Theatre, which was not of a recent date.
Right. And the obvious question then would be, where was that night's ticket? What can you tell us about the ligatures used to bind the hands and material around the head?
The string was a 3-ply hemp, as is frequently found in most households, and the safety pins used to secure the head covering were sized 14. The cloth which had surrounded the head consisted of 2 stitched bed covers, or quilts. The stitching made it clear they were both handmade, and showed indications of dried soap, grease, and a yellowish hen feather. There was also blood on both.
Did you observe anything on the body that wasn't previously mentioned from the inquest?
No, Dr. McTaggart's testimony covered the same observations I made. 8 wounds, all in the head and neck area. It appeared to us all that the hands had been bound together in a manner which suggested the rope was to carry the body rather than restrain it. Aside from the bullet wounds, there were no signs of struggle or violence. We determined to visit Father Delorme next. We arrived at the priest's home on Rue Saint-Hubert a short time later. The priest met us at the door, and my colleagues introduced me. I believed he sensed the change in the dynamic with the introduction of a new face, but he was very cool and casual about it. He invited us into his study, where we sat in comfortable chairs, and offered us cigars, and provided us with more information on their family situation.
I am a chaplain at the Assistance Publique. Like our Lord, I minister to the poor and indigent.
Like
Raoul
our
was-
Lord? Good grief.
Raoul was my half-brother. We shared the same father. I also have 4 sisters, Claudia, who lives elsewhere in Montreal with her husband. The others are all spinsters and live with me. There is my sister Rosa, age 30, and Raoul's sister Florence, age 28, and Lily, age 26.
One big happy family, together under one roof.
Yes, well, he went on to explain that their father had died in 1916, and they had continued to live in the house afterwards. His father's widow, his third wife, had moved into another house with her sister subsequent to that, and was being given a monthly allowance by Father Delorme of $50. She had been childless, and her only connection to the others was through marriage.
They look, well, not exactly happy, but who's to judge? $50 would amount to around $900 today, which seems a rather modest sum.
As you will learn, the family was rather wealthy, particularly Raoul.
What were your impressions of the priest?
Father Delorme was a very charming man, of about 35 years of age. He was of average height and appeared to be physically strong of build. His hair was brown and he had a fresh complexion. My general impression was one of authority and domination. He was clearly the master of the house.
Yes, he certainly looks it. Was there anything else in particular you noticed?
He had a shaded and low brow, with a piercing and penetrating glance, and he gesticulated often with his left hand. This caused me to consider his right hand, which was nearly buried under the sleeve of his cassock. At one point, while he moved his left hand around in a grand gesture, I noticed that his right wrist was very red. I asked him the cause.
I had a friend whose father encouraged him to sit on his hands because he moved them around too much. Not a bad idea sometimes.
I fell on the ice last Saturday on my way to the Assistance Publique, where I celebrated Mass at 7 o'clock. My wrist was sprained, and Mademoiselle Morache, the prefect, advised me to paint it with iodine.
I've done a little research on that, and iodine was often used for sprains in 1922 under the belief that it would stimulate circulation and reduce swelling. The brownish stain it would leave remained for weeks after that.
Yes, I found the explanation rather thin, albeit convenient. Too convenient, perhaps. Father Delorme continued with more details on his brother.
Raoul was 25 years old. He had been a student at the University of Ottawa for 5 years. Last summer, during his holidays, we motored together through various American cities.
Now, that business of a trip is an added detail from out of the blue. Deceptive people have a tendency to overshare in an attempt to appear transparent. I refer to this dilemma from a detective's perspective of detecting the liar before detecting the lie. What was that term you used about why deceptive people do this again, Lalonde?
It's called narrative padding, which is a signal of cognitive strain, since fabricating details requires more mental effort. The suspect is attempting to control the conversation by setting a pattern of avoiding direct answers. It can have a benefit for the interrogator, though, because it may lead to unintentionally revealing information. The lie hidden within the deception. Patience is the key at this point.
Exactly, gentlemen. And as you will see later on, this mention of a trip was intended as the base for a further series of lies to come. According to Father Delorme, Raoul had come home to Montreal on the 22nd of December last to enjoy the Christmas holiday with his family. As we have heard, he was very fond of movies and went to the show nearly every day, often twice a day after rising very late.
No friend called on him during the holidays. He slept out only once, and that was on Christmas night when he went to supper with his friend Patry. I scolded him for not having previously notified me of this.
I find this odd, on a number of levels. One is that Father Delorme expects a 25-year-old man to notify him ahead of doing something like staying out for the night. That may be a sign of the times and the religious nature of the home, but it's noteworthy. Presumably he wanted Raoul to seek his permission. The main thing for me is that the interview is now taking a different tone with respect to how Father Delorme is portraying his brother. It's critical to note that this is the first time he's displaying an overt emotional response to him.
Yes, we found that odd as well. He continued on with his criticism, which in some respects seemed rather intended to besmirch the character of his stepbrother, rather than to illuminate the important elements which led to his death. In that, though, I must say that I believe he unwittingly was.
I do not know of any friendship with young girls, and he never told me of any such thing. I may even add that I called his attention to some pretty and honest young ladies, but he was not interested.
Presumably, if Raoul had shown interest in a young woman, and that had grown into a relationship, that would have taken him from Father Delorme's sphere of control, or the women would already be within it. Were there any indications that that may have presented a problem?
Not overtly, but latently, I thought. He seemed to want to portray Raoul as someone who needed to be taken care of, and the story of his staying overnight with a friend gave the impression that Raoul was demonstrating behaviors which were rather more independent than the priest cared for. His honest, some might say disparaging, assessments of Raoul continue.
Although he was not a bright pupil, considering his age, his teachers have told me that he had made much progress this year. He was not at all discouraged, seemed quite cheerful and was anxious to get back to college.
The issue of Raoul's intellectual capacity was to come up again, and from others. This extended to all members of the family, including Father Delorme himself.
He seems to be psychologically distancing himself with these supposedly matter-of-fact descriptions of Raoul. It's almost as if he is trying to reduce his emotional connection with him and an attempt to justify his own behavior, to himself at least. This can be an attempt to ease an internal conflict he has for what he has done. I believe the term is cognitive dissonance.
Yes, I agree, I think, though I don't understand most of your mumbo-jumbo words, Lalonde. At the very least, whatever personal feelings he may or may not be dealing with, his negative characterizations are a way of trying to control the investigator's view. He's trying to square himself by blackening the other fellow, as if Raoul had it coming.
Yes, I thought the same. Il salit l'autre pour se laver, as we say in French. He dirties another to wash himself. Father Delorme went to great lengths to portray himself as Raoul's caretaker. He told us of how he had taken Raoul out during his vacation to make many purchases: boots, rubbers, towels, neckties, handkerchiefs, etc. In addition to this, he advised that Raoul's clothes had been pressed and his boxes ready for his departure. He was in fact to have returned to Ottawa on the day his dead body was discovered.
It may seem obvious to some and pointless to others, but I would be assigning detectives to verify or refute everything Delorme is telling you.
Precisely, Monsieur Lalonde. And that is exactly what I did. These things he told us were essentially true.
Do we know anything more about what Raoul did during his vacation? There seems to be a big gap there.
Father Delorme told us that on the day before he was murdered, Raoul ate breakfast with them at home. They all went to Mass because it was the Epiphany, and returned home to have lunch together. This was on Friday, January 6th. At 2:30 p.m., Raoul got dressed to go out, and advised them he would be going to the Princess Theatre. He asked the priest for money and was given a $20 bill. To his surprise, Raoul removed a $5 bill and a wad of counterfeit money that was used by the college during their commercial classes. I must jump ahead briefly to say that Father Delorme did not show us any of this college money that day, though he must have had some, because this image appeared in the newspaper 3 weeks later. He had given it to them to reproduce.
He's clearly trying to suggest that robbery was a motive for the murder, based upon a belief that Raoul was carrying a large amount of fake money. According to Father Delorme, that is. Moreover, none of that money, real or fake, was found with the body.
Sounds like he's trying to manipulate the press, too. A dangerous game.
You will be perhaps surprised to learn just how far he went shortly, Inspector Murray. I return now to our interview that day with Father Delorme in his well-appointed home office.
Some days before, Raoul had brought his watch to a jeweler, Scott's, as I recall, who was to repair it. He asked me to lend him mine, with the chain, and I agreed willingly. Mine was a beautiful pocket watch from Burke's.
Uh-huh. Sounds like he really likes that watch. That would explain the broken watch chain found in Raoul's vest. Will that missing watch ever show up?
Indeed it will, in the most surprising and nefarious way.
This is getting exciting, kind of like a mystery, which I suppose it is.
Father Delorme then went on to say that when his brother Raoul left to go to the theatre at 2:30 p.m., his sisters were all there to witness it.
Did they confirm that?
After a fashion, as you get to know the Delorme sisters better, you will discover that their responses were often vague, double-ended, and clearly designed to meet the expectations of their older brother.
Was this the last time they saw Raoul?
That, mon cher Monsieur Lalonde, is the $100 question. I suspect that one, at least, saw him again. However, let us consider the response to that same question, which I put to Father Delorme.
At 7 o'clock of the same day, I was called to the telephone and recognized Raoul's voice. He told me that he had met a college chum and another friend, and that they were about to have a grand supper, some style, after which they would spend the evening at the Allen Theatre. He added that if he did not turn up that evening, he would come home the next day. I said, "Why don't you come with your friends and spend the evening with us?"
That's my business. If I do not come back home tonight, I will be home tomorrow.
He rang off then, and I told my sisters what he had said.
That doesn't sound much like the image of Raoul he has previously described. Moreover, it doesn't jibe with the older brother who is openly angry with Raoul for staying overnight at a friend's house on Christmas.
No, it does not. Nor does it jibe, as you say, with my learning later that the Delorme sisters and Father Delorme himself all had individual plans for the evening and were not home at all.
Oh, what tangled webs we weave. When first we... Oh, what's the rest of that darn saying? Did he say he dropped Raoul's watch off at Sir Walter Scott's? That doesn't make any sense.
Practice to deceive, I believe, completes the quote, which was by Sir Walter Scott, the novelist and poet, not the watch repair guy in Montreal.
Oh. Well, I'll take you at your word on the watch repairman, but I think you're mixing the quote up. Never mind, you try your best. Is it just me, or has anyone else found me particularly brilliant this episode? I suspect I'm not alone on that. So I invite one and all to step up and just say it in the comments. Don't be shy. You know you want to. Whoops! Busted!
It's at times like these that I remember your book was called Memoirs of a Great Detective.
Indeed. I am a fine judge of high-quality work. You're not doing too bad, Lejoie. Carry on, lad. Carry on. You're in good company.
Good grief. Please do take a moment to comment, though, folks. Well, I hate to say it, guys, but we're going to need to take a break. I think this is a good time to sit back and take a good hard look at where we have been, and then next episode we can listen to our marvelous guest tell us where we're going.
George Farah Lejoie, the great Montreal detective, and now our great friend. You might consider grabbing some sleep during the break, Lejoie. I'm exhausted just thinking of the amount of work you're getting done in such short order.
You honor me, Inspector Murray and Monsieur Lalonde. I am enjoying the opportunity to be your guest and to tell people about this complex and important investigation.
We'll get together again very soon, folks, and until that time, I'm Dave Lalonde.
And I'm John Wilson Murray, and we are
Two Old Dicks.
We are two old dicks and we say goodbye to all until next day, when we will share the tricks we know and how the clues began to glow.